everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me for another episode here, still in chapter 10 of Chaos by Tom O'Neill. The next section is called the psychedelic syndrome. When Roger Smith joined forces with the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic to begin the ARP, he was picking up where David left off. But this time the research involved people, not rats if you remember. This meant that both Smith and Manson were often in the same place at the same time, with both Smiths having received funding from a federal institute, later revealed to be a CIA friend. It was in a certain sense coincidental, David said of the arrangement. Roger was the head of the SPEED project, and Charlie came to the Haight and visited Roger. He didn't come to be part of the SPEED research project. It was just that Roger happened to be his parole officer. Well, how convenient, how convenient. Details on the ARP and on the pharmacological goings-on at the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, more generally, were hard to come by. The reams of record keeping you'd expect from clinical experimentation simply weren't there. And you find that over and over. Stuff just mysteriously disappears. Even when you think about the stuff that was in the Manson files that Tom O'Neill found, if you remember when they were talking about when he went to that like army barracks, there was stuff just gone, empty folders, and I mean, it's evidence really, but I don't know. Where did it go? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Stephen Piddle, a forensic psychologist who worked with both Smiths at the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, has a mouthful. I need to just call it the medical clinic. I'm gonna call it the free clinic from here on out, okay, guys? But he volunteered a stunning bit of information that Roger and David had neglected to share with me. The only thing I remember about ARP was that it got burglarized one night and Roger lost all of his files. Once again, convenient. And there was nothing digital in these days, so I guess you lose your documents, they're gone forever, right? Their disappearance had been jarring, in part because Roger was an unusually paranoid guy to begin with. He was especially skittish about Manson. Why though? After the murders, Roger refused to discuss him with anyone. Guilty conscience, maybe? I don't know. Maybe he wanted to stay out of jail? It's a good question. Piddle assumed that Smith didn't want to be blamed for directing Manson to the Haight, which I think would have happened. And that's what people are suggesting now, that this stuff has come to light, right? He felt people were saying that he was the one who put the toxins into the environment. The Free Medical Clinic's original chief psychiatrist, Dr. Ernest Dernberg, remembered the theft of the ARP files too. As he recalled, they'd gone missing right after the announcement of Manson's arrest for the Tate LaBianca murders, and that Roger, understandably, was pretty upset. Well, isn't that convenient timing? I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think happened to him? Do you think they went missing, or they were stolen, or they were destroyed in order to save someone else's butt? Who knows? Maybe somebody on the legal team had something to do with it. We just never know. We'll never know at this point. Nothing else was taken from the medical clinic, which led the staff to believe that the police or some federal agency might have removed the files. These were research papers, he reminded me. It didn't make sense for someone to steal these things when they didn't inherently have any value to the average individual. Well, they didn't have any inherent value, but they were pretty damning, or we assume they were because we don't know what was in them. Seemed to have a more nefarious purpose. The Smiths both denied that the theft had ever happened. You're dealing with aging memories, David said. But Dernberg and Piddle, full-time doctors and credible sources, I thought, stood by their stories. They were absolutely stolen, Piddle said. Dernberg, perturbed by David's insinuation about his faculties, told me more than he remembered. It was a considerable amount of research, the premier amphetamine research conducted at street level. It would have been very important to the clinic, and it disappeared. Call David. Ask Roger if he has the files or knows where they are. Both men said they had no idea, but they both said they were not stolen as well. What have survived are the many issues of the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs, the Free Medical Clinic's in-house research organ, still active to this day. David Smith founded it in 1967, and at various points, both he and Roger served on its editorial board. In the late 60s and early 70s, the journal printed a raft of articles by David and other clinicians about the long-term effects of LSD and amphetamines. One of these articles hoped to find out whether a dramatic drug-induced experience would have a lasting impact on the individual's personality. Well, they said that they had information on that and that no, that they shouldn't, but I don't know if I believe that. I lean towards saying I don't believe that. How could it not? I mean, this stuff affects your brain, and especially long-term use or extensive use. I don't know. It has to. It has to. You only get one brain and so many nerve cells, and they don't regenerate. So I don't know how it couldn't. My opinion only, but I don't think so. Another observed that feelings of frustrated anger led people to want to try LSD. The soil from which the flower children arise, the author wrote, is filled more with anger and aggression, thorns and thistles, rather than passion and petunias. So it sounds like a form of escapism, not just, oh, they're peaceful, free love, not a care in the world people that were led to try LSD. Which makes sense because a lot of people turn to drugs, alcohol, and a million other things as a form of escapism. Under emotional pressure, acid could induce images and sensations of anger or hate magnified into nightmarish proportions. David Smith had studied this same phenomena, formulating an idea that he called the psychedelic syndrome, first articulated in 1967 or early 68. The gist was that acid, when taken by groups of like-minded people, led to a chronic LSD state that reinforced the interpretation of psychedelic reality. That scares the heck out of me. I wouldn't touch this stuff with a 10-foot pole. I hear people, talking about microdosing, mushrooms and I don't know if they're talking about LSD so much, mainly mushrooms, but it scares me, to be honest. I would not. It's not something I would experiment with personally. If any of you all have tried it and had a good experience, let us know down below, or if you've had a horrifying experience. I don't know. I've never tried it. I never plan to. I value my brain and my sanity a little too much, I think. The more often the same group of friends dropped acid, the more they encouraged one another to adopt the worldview they discovered together on LSD, thus producing dramatic psychological changes. That makes a lot of sense to me. It seems like it'd be obvious, but maybe it's that whole hindsight, what do they call it? Hindsight bias, something like that. Like, we know now what these drugs are capable of, and back in the day, they didn't. I mean, this stuff was new and they didn't know. So it seems obvious now, but maybe it wasn't at the time. Usually the psychedelic syndrome was harmless, but regular LSD use could cause the emergence of a dramatic orientation to mysticism. And in people with pre-psychotic personalities, Smith wrote, LSD precipitated a long-term psychological disorder, usually a depressive reaction or a schizophrenic process. No way. You will never convince me to touch this stuff. I don't know if you've ever known anyone with schizophrenia, but even depression, long-term depression, no thank you. Had Smith seen this syndrome in the family? After Manson had been arrested for the murders, David wrote, Charlie could probably be diagnosed as ambulatory schizophrenic. He said the same thing when I asked about Manson. I felt that he was schizo. It was Roger Smith who had the better diagnosis, and the earlier one, David maintained. Roger said that he knew from day one that Charlie was a psychopath. So is it ethical to experiment on someone you you believe to be a psychopath or a schizo, I don't know. I don't know if I think the CIA destroyed this stuff or if they destroyed it because they didn't want to be found guilty of making this monster. I don't know. But Roger apparently never thought it was necessary to intervene, to send his parolee back to prison, or to get him proper psychiatric care. Roger maintains he didn't believe Manson was dangerous and couldn't have foreseen what would happen. Instead, he sent him to the Haight and watched him drop acid every day, accruing suggestible young followers as he went. Meanwhile, David was studying the exact psychological conditions that gave rise to the Manson family while he treated them at his clinic. Bugliosi had erased all of these facts from his history of the group. Roger Smith knew that the stereotype of the addict had a lot of potency in the popular imagination. Casual drug users were regarded as inherently criminal, a tear in the fabric of society. The public's fear of such people was easily manipulated. In 1966, the year before Manson was released from prison, Smith published a criminology paper called Status Politics and the Image of the Addict, examining the propaganda that had stigmatized Chinese, or Oriental as he put it, opium smokers in San Francisco in the early 20th century. Citing police files and strategy manuals, Smith described an organized effort to cast opium addicts, who were by and large peaceful, as insidious deviants who posed a threat to society. Well, they're still doing that today with fentanyl and all that. Trying to, I don't even know how to say. They have these like free needle exchanges. You can go pick up these little test strips to see if your fentanyl's safe, which I don't know. It's like, oh, we got to take the stigma away from addiction. And I get it. Addiction is a big problem, but also we can't just sugarcoat it and try to present desperate people that might do bad things. We can't just excuse it out of hand, I guess is what I'm saying. To this end, some agents were assigned to pose as drug addicts and infiltrate the opium scene. Their objective was to characterize the addict as a dangerous individual likely to rob, rape, or plunder in his crazed state. And it worked. The once invisible opium users of San Francisco's Chinese ghettos were by 1925 depicted in the media as crazed dope fiends. The shift in public perception allowed the police to crack down on the Chinese population, deporting or institutionalizing the undesirables. Smith neither valorized nor condemned these efforts, but he noted that they were effective. The Orientals, he wrote, were viewed as a threat to the existing structure of life in this country. Tainting their image meant that they could be differentiated and degraded to the satisfaction of society. It's hard not to see how such research could be applied to Haight Ashbury hippies in the late 60s. Most Americans frowned on acid, as they frowned on all drugs, but it took Charles Manson to give LSD new and fearsome dimensions. Suddenly it caused violence, and the hippies who used it were perceived as wild-eyed and dangerous, where once they'd been harmless, if vacuous, pleasure seekers. Now that was the whole purpose of Operation Chaos, and what was the other one? I can't think of it. The FBI one. It's escaping me. I'll put it here. That was the whole point, was to basically take down these activists and, stop the anti-war movement, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I guess that was their goal. It worked. The Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic's goal, free healthcare for everyone, was an unimpeachable part of the hippie ethic, and there could be no doubting that David Smith and his volunteer doctors had improved the community. But just because the clinic had free in its name didn't mean that it had no cost. That's what I was just about to say. I'm like, nothing is free. So nothing's free. I mean, we all know it. Taxpayers pay for stuff, but that doesn't mean it's free. Somebody pays for it. It might not be the person who's getting it for free, but It's totally, we know, nothing's free. It might not be a popular opinion to have, but it's true. The place served as a gateway between the hippie world and the straight world, affording doctors a closer look at the hierarchies and nuances of the counterculture. In exchange for their free health care, patients were held up to the light and scrutinized by eager researchers. David Smith, chief among them. Emmett Grogan, the founder of the Diggers, was one of the few observers who saw something amiss behind Smith's idealism. The Diggers were an anarchist group known for providing food, housing, and medical aid to runaways in the Bay Area. Smith liked them, and he worked with them at a free infirmary based out of their Happening House. It inspired his own clinic. But as Grogan wrote in his 1972 memoir, Ringo Levio, the admiration wasn't mutual, at least not for long. Smith soon began his own self-aggrandizement. He appeared more concerned with the pharmacology of the situation than with treating the ailing people who came to him for help. Grogan noticed that he kept detailed records about drugs and their abuse. These he used to secure funding for the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, which he opened only 6 weeks after he joined the Diggers operation. Grogan saw through the medical clinic's mission statement right away. Just because no one was made to pay a fee when they went there didn't make it a free clinic, he wrote. On the contrary, the patients were treated as research subjects, and the facility was used to support whatever medical innovations were new and appropriate to the agency. It kind of makes me think of like selling plasma, or you can sign up to get paid to be kind of a lab rat, but they're not doing it under the guise of, hey, we just want to help you, here's some free health care. And it's slightly different. Paying someone that knows what they're getting themselves into, it's slightly different in my opinion. If you just think you're going somewhere to get something for free and you're drugged up and you might not know the difference, is it ethical? I don't think so. And maybe that, again, is why the research went missing. They knew exactly what they were doing and that was not ethical. That's just an opinion, but I don't know. I'd be curious to see where it went, but it's probably burnt to a crisp the moment it was taken out of there. Of course, one of these patients was Manson, who became one of David Smith's research subjects as well. He was such a special case that Smith tracked him far beyond the walls of the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic, sending his top researcher all the way down to Los Angeles, where Manson and his ranks of followers had set up shop on the time-worn western sets of the Spawn Ranch. I don't know. Let me see what we got left here. Okay. The next section is called the Group Marriage Commune. You might remember the name Alan Rose. It was Rose who dropped everything and went to Mendocino County in '68 when several of Manson's followers wound up in jail there. That trip was only a prelude to his deeper involvement with the family, which saw him in bed with the group, with the group to study their sexual dynamics, or just to get laid, depending on whom you ask. Rose was a friend of Roger Smith. He'd helped set up the ARP, but he was even closer to David Smith, who told me, Al was like my disciple and I was like his father. A formal rabbinical student, Rose had dropped out of college in Ohio to move to the Haight in '66 when he was 21. He became the medical clinic's head administrator and a research assistant at various times to both Smiths. Rose and David went on to co-author 3 studies of the Haight's drug culture in the Journal of Psychedelic Drugs. Like the Smiths, Rose had an intuitive grasp of the population and a clinician's knowledge of the drugs they were taking, even though he had no formal medical training. While reserved and socially awkward by many accounts, Rose enjoyed the Haight, especially its sexual openness. He felt inexperienced in that regard, and he hoped he could change that when Roger introduced him to Manson and the girls, who were coming by the clinic with increased frequency. Rose was enamored. he decided, along with David, that they'd make for good research subjects. But already there was the question of his impartiality. The legend around the Haight Ashbury Free Medical Clinic was that the girls had seduced Rose, probably on Manson's orders. All right, I'm going to stop it there. There's a couple more pages to this section, but I'm not going to get to it today. What do you all think so far? What do you think happened to those missing records? I mean, you could make a case for several different things. I think that both Smiths, you could say, they had a guilty conscience, although it's weird that they said they didn't disappear when others said they did. But there's also that Journal of Psychedelic Medicine that at least has some of the records in it. I don't know. I mean, like I said, these revelations didn't come to light until O'Neill wrote this book not so long ago. So they really did pretty much, if they did have something to do with it, they got away with it and went on to live their lives. I don't know. I'm not one to excuse anything that the CIA or FBI do or did at that time. But I don't know. I don't know if they had more to lose or if the individuals had more to lose. Maybe it was just a joint decision between the agencies, whichever one or both that it was, and the people involved, just to wash their hands of it so, they could come out looking clean, or nothing could be proven, I guess is more accurate. And I guess you could argue that it worked. I mean, up until, a couple years ago when this book was written. I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you think happened to those missing records? I don't think just some Joe Schmo off the street came in and stole them, because why would they? Who cares if you weren't someone that had something to lose or someone that wanted that information to use for yourself? But if that was the case, nobody did anything with that information. It seems like it was taken to absolve someone or some agencies of any guilt associated with the Manson family. That's my opinion. What do you all think? What do you all think? Let me know in the comments. And once again, thanks for joining me. And we'll be back for more soon. You guys have a good one. Take care. Bye.